Thanks for coming to Snacks with an Expert, presented by Spark Offices. So Spark Offices is a collaborative workspace based in Manchester. We help sort of unite small businesses so they can come together, exchange ideas, exchange workflow, people, and just sort of build their businesses together. So we offer conference rooms, private offices, and come and sit down desk where you can just come in for a day or a few hours in a day and get some work done. So we've been doing these Snacks with an Expert now for almost a year now, I think. And so we're super happy to introduce today's expert, who is Anne Rush. She's the founder and CEO of Elasta Jobs. She's very passionate about providing flexible work solutions for our clients by matching independent talent and companies. Before she launched Elasta Jobs, she gained experience in talent, operations, and technology product leadership at a Fortune 100 company. Her career in HR has spanned several different areas, including employee retention, recruiting, global HR consulting, and strategic planning. So without any further ado, I'd like to present Anne Rush, and she's going to be doing Kickstarting Your Company HR, how to establish a talent strategy to achieve your 2022 business goals. Take it away, Anne.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Chris and Spark Offices. I'm excited to be here today, in particular with a community of small business owners, and because I think that that's an area that oftentimes you're the one wearing all the hats, whether it's operations or HR. And so hopefully I can bring some of my HR expertise today to help everyone out. So I'm just going to share my screen here. And we'll go ahead and get started. So as Chris mentioned, I'm going to be talking today about how to establish a talent strategy to achieve your business goals. And more specifically, I want to talk about how your company culture is really one of your greatest assets, or unfortunately can be one of your greatest liabilities when it comes to talent acquisition and retention. I'm going to share how to ensure that your talent strategy supports your overall business goals. And don't worry if you're sitting there thinking that you don't have a talent strategy. Hopefully by the end of the conversation today, you'll have some good takeaways for establishing one at your company. It sounds more complicated than it is. And to make things more applicable for everyone, I'm going to share some talent strategy best practices for 3 common business goals: growth, expense savings, and innovation. Hoping to offer some practical advice about how you can engage with and motivate your team with respect to those goals. I definitely would love to keep this interactive. So, and I do have prepared content. We'll have time for questions at the end. But if you have questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to jump in as we go along. So to start out, I'm going to say a word, and I'd like you to think about the first thought that comes to mind. So ready? The word is human resources.
Easy.
So I won't make people answer. I'm not, but my guess is that many of you were probably thinking to yourself, payroll or employee handbook, or gosh, there's a million regulatory requirements that I have to follow. And those are certainly critical aspects of human resource management. That being said, they are more the table stakes and really only a small part of what an HR function can do for you and your business. And so the strategic side of HR, or what I'm going to call talent management, is really the side that I get excited about. And that's what I want to talk a bit more about today. So the marketplace for talent, for any of you that have been trying to hire right now, is incredibly competitive. And it's been fueled by the Great Resignation. According to dictionary.com, the Great Resignation is an informal name for the widespread trend of a significant number of workers leaving their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also sometimes called the Big Quit. But whatever you call it, since July of 2021, over 4 million Americans have voluntarily quit their jobs each month, and that's continued month over month. So as a result, all companies, regardless of their size and growth forecast, need to be thinking about retaining the talent that they have and how to attract new talent. The Great Resignation has shown us that employees are not just looking for a strong comp and benefits package, they're demanding more from their employers, including meaningful work, growth opportunities, and flexibility. So I'm going to ask you to think about what your company's mission is. What are you known for? I would guess that everyone here was able to answer that question really quickly. My next question is, what is your company's culture? And I'm curious if your answer was as quick. So folks don't always give a lot of thought to the culture that they're creating. But in my experience, if you don't articulate the culture that you want to offer your employees and talk about it, over time, it can actually shift without you realizing it. As you think about your culture, do you think that your employees would agree with your assessment of the culture of your organization? There are frequently gaps between the desired culture, the true current culture, and then the executive team's perception of the culture. And as a result, having an unbiased assessment of your culture is a great place to start. You can do that more formally by bringing in an HR consultant to speak with team members, but you can also do it informally by just sending out an anonymous survey to employees. Of course, there are some core tenets of an effective workplace culture, such as treating people with respect, valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, those are non-negotiable, of course. But outside of this, there's not one right mold, and it often depends on the industry and the business that you have. But if you're trying to think about some of the aspects of culture and what you're trying to shape where you work or at the company that you lead, Sloan Management Review had some good thoughts around elements of an adaptive culture. So one is a learning mindset. Is your company more oriented toward planning and execution, or more oriented toward experimentation and learning? Collaborative reflex. So are you more hierarchical and it's kind of top-down driven? Or is there more lateral collaboration and teamwork? Bias to action is another one. So this would be, on one hand, focus on risk mitigation, and on the other hand, speed maximization. So if your industry is highly regulated, you might be more focused on risk mitigation and checks and balances, and that's okay. That's what I mean by there's no one size fits all for the culture. I think the important thing to do is to really understand how you want employees to feel about working for your company, and getting feedback from them on their experiences. And then once you get that feedback, you want to share it back with your team and talk openly about what you heard, what you aspire the culture to be, and ask for your team's support to making improvements and kind of holding you accountable and giving you that ongoing feedback. So with your culture as a base, you can start to build a talent strategy. And I know I mentioned in the beginning, the words talent strategy may feel a bit daunting. And you might think, oh gosh, that's like something for large companies with a large HR department to be focused on. But it really isn't the case. It's just a fancy phrase for the next step in strategic planning, and that is thinking about how your talent, how your team is going to help you achieve the business goals that you've set. And an effective talent strategy always starts with those business goals. So as you look to 2022, what are your business goals? For the purpose of today's discussion, I want to offer some general recommendations based on 3 common goals that a lot of companies have: growth, expense savings, and innovation. And certainly at the end of the talk, I'm happy to talk through any other areas of interest that folks may have. Before I do a deeper dive on the 3 areas, just sort of pause to see if any initial questions or things that folks want to talk about.
So far, very thought-provoking, and we'll have more to chat about it.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I'll keep going, and people can jump in if they do have questions. Otherwise, I'll be prepared for the end. All right. So growth. So there's a lot here, and I think this is, most businesses, right, have plans for growth. It might include more customers for your existing products, or an expansion of your current business offerings. And to support the growth, you may need more talent. And as we talked about, the labor market is incredibly competitive right now. No matter what the labor market, though, generally speaking, if I'm designing a talent strategy for growth, I actually like to start with how to retain the talent that you currently have before I think about attracting new talent. And so to improve retention, you want to identify what sources of information you have already about how your team members or your current talent feels about working for your company. Do you have any surveys maybe you send out, or anecdotal feedback that will help you understand how folks are feeling? One effective, and it's often underutilized, method is to conduct what we call stay interviews. They can be done by HR, but it doesn't have to be an HR team member. It could be a skip level, or even just a one-on-one between a manager and a direct report. And some questions that you want to ask would include, what are that individual's development goals and career aspirations? And do they know how the company may be able to support them in achieving those goals? What does the person like what does the person like about working at the company? Is there anything that they would like to see changed? And the last question I recommend asking, I will admit it's not the easiest question to ask, but I encourage people to ask the employee to let them know if they're looking for other opportunities, or if they're going to be looking for other opportunities. And the reason here is, if that person feels comfortable and is able to come to you and give you that heads up, that gives you a better understanding of what they're looking for, to see if there is something that you can do internally so that they don't ultimately leave. As I mentioned earlier when talking about the Great Resignation, many employees have shared that they left their job in search of meaningful work, or growth opportunities, or greater flexibility. Employees who are looking for meaningful work often want to feel that their personal values align with the mission of the company that they work for. Do your team members understand your company's mission and how they contribute toward that? If not, making sure to share this can help an employee understand how their individual work is meaningful. Career development is next, and this is an area where small businesses or startups may initially struggle, because quite frankly, there may not be a lot of internal promotional opportunities, but that actually doesn't mean you don't offer career development or growth opportunities. When I think back, early in my career, I worked for a nonprofit. And then after that, I went to work for a Fortune 100 size company. So big difference. But when I was at the nonprofit, I had the opportunity to wear a lot of different hats, work on a variety of projects. I had access to the senior leadership team. It was great for my career development. So even if you don't have promotional opportunities to offer to your staff, make sure to talk about other meaningful development opportunities that you can offer to them. If you ask them what skills they want to develop, and you have projects going on where they could develop those skills, try your best to align that so that they're getting that, they feel like they're getting that development. And then the third area that we're hearing a lot more about is the search for flexibility. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be 100% remote. In particular, if you're in an industry that relies on in-person work, oftentimes in-person collaboration is much more effective. So what you can do with flexibility is talk with each individual to understand what flexibility means to them, because flexibility means something different to everyone. Some people may just need to work remotely on a particular day or shift their work hours to pick their kids up from school. Maybe someone wants to take a 2-hour lunch break so they can go to the gym each day, and that's what flexibility means to that person. As long as the employee is exempt, which means they're not hourly and you don't need to pay overtime, and their request for a flexible arrangement doesn't interfere with their ability to get their job done, I recommend to managers to be as flexible as they can in creating the right flexibility for each of their employees. So I know that if you're growing, you probably can't rely solely on retaining the talent that you have. And when it comes to improving outcomes with talent attraction and acquisition, there are 3 key areas that you can look at. First, how do you package and present your talent value proposition? So again, those are big words for essentially, what do you offer your talent? And so here's where you can think about pay, bonuses, benefits, time off, work location, career development, flat structure, access to leadership, etc. So think about the full package that you offer. And ask your team members what they like best about working for your company to get ideas. And then, in fact, if you conduct some of those stay interviews, you may get some good information from them that way as well. Look at whether you have an external page, web page, splash page, that talks about the benefits of working at your company. It can be really quick to put together, and it's well worth the time that you invest in it. You can consider putting up quotes from current employees, of course, as long as they're okay with it. And even better is to do quick video clips of current employees talking about what it's like to work for your company. The next thing that you can look at in your recruiting process is to think about making it personalized and also your response time. So if you're proactively reaching out to someone and asking them to apply, make that outreach more personal. Why are you interested in this candidate? That helps that individual feel like you're really interested in them as a person, them as a candidate, and would be invested in their individual success at your company. Last but not least, you want to look at your cycle time. And that's essentially how long does it take from someone applying to a role at your company to them being made an offer. Take a look at how many interviews you put a candidate through. How quickly can you make an offer? In a competitive talent market like we're in, it definitely pays to move quickly. So I know we covered a lot in this growth section. I'll just pause quickly to see if there are questions, and then I'll move on to expense savings. All right, everybody's saving it up for the end, which is just fine. So there are times when a business needs to temporarily retract or have a larger focus on expenses. And that can be a difficult time to manage morale and keep the team focused. But if you approach expense savings strategically and as a team effort, you might find that actually the team is very helpful in identifying areas of opportunity for those savings. My first recommendation is to look at the projects and initiatives that you have in flight and really prioritize what's most important to the success of your business. Creating greater focus on a few key initiatives actually has an added benefit of making quicker progress in those areas too. The next thing that I recommend is making sure employees are clear on their objectives and how those objectives support the company goals and priorities. This ensures that, for each of those areas that you've prioritized, you've got folks focused and knowing how they're contributing to them. And make sure that you're giving regular feedback on performance so that you can maximize the results from the team that you have. You might consider recognizing employees who come up with ideas for improving processes or reducing expenses. Make it, it's, again, I said at the beginning, like make it a team effort and reward or recognize the team for finding ways to cut expenses. You also might want to think of other sources of talent rather than full-time employees. So independent contractors can provide a great way of getting the talent that you need when you need it. And you may pay a bit more per hour that way, but you're only bringing someone on for a specific project or a set period of time. So in the long run, it can actually save quite a bit of money to leverage contractors. And it's also easier to scale up and down quickly. Another idea it's fairly new, but in particular in the startup space, is to crowdsource ideas. And so what crowdsourcing is, for those who aren't familiar with it, you take a defined problem and ask a wider group of people to think through it. And it could be employees, it could be customers, external SMEs, it could be folks that are office mates at Spark offices. So, just getting a group of folks together to work through a problem. And you can compensate in a lot of different ways, and it's not always monetary with crowdsourcing. Sometimes it is. Sometimes there's a sort of what's considered a award for a monetary award for the best idea. Sometimes it's just professional recognition, and sometimes it is the best idea is then that individual is given a contract and works as an independent contractor for the company to see their idea through. So looking externally for talent and ideas can help to provide a cheaper pool of talent when you need to be focused on expense savings. In addition, it can actually also help to drive innovation, which was actually our last area of focus for today. So ensuring your company is focused on innovation is certainly a common goal for entrepreneurs. As entrepreneurs, we're constantly trying new things, making things better, understanding how we can bring greater value to our customers. But unless you're a solopreneur and on your own, you're ultimately relying on your team to have an innovative mindset and to contribute to your company's innovation. So you want to think about, do you have your workplace set up and talent policies that foster innovation? First, you want to take a look back at culture. I know we talked about that at the beginning. Companies that are innovative tend to have a culture focused on learning, collaboration, and empowerment. Here's where you want to look at your employees' objectives again and performance reviews and see if you're valuing innovative thinking and bringing up new ideas. When it comes to collaboration, do your teams tend to be, siloed, or do folks come together? And if you need to help to foster that coming together, one way that you can do that is depending on the size of your organization, of course, but to pull a team member from different departments and bring everybody together on a small team, maybe 5, maybe 8 people, to work on a project. You get different ideas that way. If you have someone from finance and someone from within more of an IT lens, more of an operations lens, they're all going to think about it differently and together tackle the problem. The other area that you want to think about when it comes to innovation is, do you have discourse that employees feel comfortable disagreeing? So there are actually 2 different types of environments where an employee might not feel comfortable disagreeing. One is the more obvious, and that is an environment where folks are maybe ridiculed for their ideas, or they're afraid to speak up because they won't get a good performance rating. And that's not a very typical environment. That would be a very top-down environment. But the other one is, it's somewhat surprising, but it makes sense in hindsight. And that's actually the polar opposite. And those are environments that are too polite. So nobody wants to say an idea is bad. Nobody wants to offer up, hey, you know what? I actually don't think that's going to work. And so you actually want something in the middle. You want people to feel comfortable disagreeing, because that's when you're going to get the best ideas. And that really goes back to, again, setting that culture where people feel comfortable bringing ideas and discussing them as a team. So as we kind of wrap up here, I know I presented a lot of areas that you can think about and take away, but really it comes down to, if you take just 2 things away, communication and culture. So communication, making sure that your employees and your full team feels comfortable. It has different mechanisms for giving feedback. Certainly one-on-ones are very important. If you have multiple levels in an organization, having regular skip levels, company-wide meetings, and also some mechanisms for anonymous feedback as well, surveys, working through an HR department, but just making sure that communication is transparent. It's just so important. And that really helps to build a good, strong culture where employees want to work and will be engaged. So that is actually the content that I had prepared for today. I know I kind of took us in a lot of different areas, from growth to expense savings to innovation. And now I'm just really open to whatever questions folks have.
Go ahead, Judy, you go first.
Oh, I was going to ask a little bit about, are there any good surveys that you would recommend that we could utilize for kind of seeing a little bit more about where we're at with our culture?
Yeah, so I'll have to, so off the shelf, I don't know that I have particular like surveys that, but I can check that. There are like, there's like Survey Monkey, and there are ways of just making your own surveys. And I tend to ask, when I set them up, like broad questions, and really let it, in particular, if you have a fairly small organization and have the capacity to read people's responses, make some of them more open-ended so that folks can, like typically you'll do maybe a range of 1 to 5. I'm happy working at this company, 1 to 5. I feel good about my compensation, 1 to 5. I have regular conversations with my manager. So those are all some, common questions that that you might want to ask, and then leave opportunities for follow-up. In particular, if people answer, if they disagree, hopefully they'll write in why they disagree. So I kind of recommend sort of taking one of those survey tools that are often free and creating your own. But that being said, I'd be happy to follow up with, I can maybe put my email in the chat, and I can search out there and see if there's a good, just kind of standard one off the shelf, and send it to you after the call.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just have a question about, like, so if you want to start establishing a culture in your company, like where do you start? Like what would you say like the golden thing to start with would be?
Sure. So I think, typically when you found a company, I feel like you sort of go into it saying to yourself, I want a workplace where employees ... So I know I'm not like giving you a great answer there, but I think it's like I'd ask myself that question of, what's most important to you? Is it that you want a energized, innovative environment? I want employees who come in with a new ideas each day, kind of a thing. Or, I want a very collaborative environment. Or, so I'd say it really starts at the leadership level of what do you want the experience of your workplace to be, and kind of going from there. So I think it's what's most important to you as a leader. And then, of course, like I said, that assumes that people feel comfortable speaking up, people feel respected, people, value diversity and inclusion. And, certainly those are like core tenets. But then beyond that, what type of environment are you really trying to create?
I have one. I want to go back to the stay conversation. Would you explain what the difference is between that sort of conversation and maybe like an annual review?
Yeah, so I would separate them out, partly because in my mind, an annual review is, I'll start with the annual review. So an annual review would be, certainly providing the employee feedback, and actually, hopefully, it's not just annually. I'm a big proponent of, I never want there to be surprises in an annual review. So hopefully you're sitting down regularly and providing feedback. But that being said, I feel like with an annual review as a leader, you're probably doing more talking than potentially, because you're giving that feedback and you're giving examples, and certainly there's opportunity for the employee as well to talk about what they felt they went well, what didn't go well, but it's more about the individual and you're doing more of the talking. In a stay interview, I think you're doing much less of the talking and you're really asking questions of them. You know, what are they, like I had said, you know, what do they enjoy about working at the company? What kind of keeps them motivated? What would they want to change if they could? So in that instance, they're doing more of the talking and you're focused. It's more them giving you the feedback versus vice versa. You can certainly have it both ways, but that's how I guess I would distinguish the two.
So then they work really well in tandem. So maybe that's something. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you have a really strong relationship with your team members and you're meeting with them frequently, a more formal stay interview might be unnatural because you're talking about those things anyway. But not everyone is you know, quite as good at meeting that frequently with employees where they would really have a good sense of some of those questions that you might ask in a stay interview. At larger companies, I will say stay interviews are often conducted by HR, but I don't think that they need to be. I think it's really just all about open communication and feedback.
Okay. So how then, to follow up, how often do you recommend stay interview, or, you know, that conversation? I like the conversation better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually that's a good point too. I would never call it with the employee that we're having a stay interview. So I should say that too. That probably is obvious, but not always. So, you know, I think if you're just approaching it where you're talking about the employees' career goals and development and those types of things, I mean, that should be an ongoing dialogue for sure. I think that what you want to make sure is in every conversation you're having with employees that you always ask them for feedback. Do you have any feedback for me? Do you have anything you'd like to see different? So you know, a lot of the questions you can do on a regular basis, even in your just regular one-on-ones. I mean, some of them like, are you thinking about leaving the company, or those types of questions, you know, I would not do frequently, you know, maybe once every 6 months or once a year, or if you notice, hey, something's been off, let's sit down and see if you've got feedback for me or for the company.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one quick one. So I know obviously culture is super important, and it's difficult now with COVID and Zoom and people working from home. Any suggestions on how to keep culture in your company when they're not in the same room?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is definitely a challenge. I think it depends on the teams, but some things that I've seen, and so these suggestions are not going to work for everyone. You got to pick and choose what you think will work for you and your team. I've certainly making sure that you have frequent communication. I mean, that's important both in the office and remote, but I think it's even more important when it's remote. as long as everyone's comfortable, I am a big fan of video. Certainly if an employee really doesn't want to use video, that's okay. But I think that it is much more powerful to feel like you're having at least a face-to-face conversation. So I think video helps, making sure that there are regular one-on-ones, because you can't necessarily like do a stop by someone's desk or do it what we would call a drive-by on a daily basis. Maybe it's a daily huddle that the team has, even if it's just 15 minutes, not always making things about work too. And you can kind of balance this with your team and the culture that you want to have. But some people will do like on a Monday huddle, hey, what did everybody do over the weekend to start out, right? Or share picture. If you've got like some spot where there's shared, where you can do something shared visually, share pictures from the weekend. I've sthen like a virtual happy hour being successful as well. And then I think too, to the extent that it's safe and it follows the right regulations, depending on where you are and people are comfortable, finding time to get together in person, if that is possible, is huge. And I know it's winter, so it's harder. But when the weather gets better, I mean, hopefully we won't be living like this always. But planning things outside for people to get together, if that's a safe way to get together. But really, you have to be a bit more deliberate to make sure that, especially for maybe team members who are a bit more of introverts, or if you haven't heard from someone in a while, you should talk to each person each day. I really feel that way, even if it's just like a 5 minutes, hey, how's your day going, through Slack. You need to keep that communication going. I'd actually open it up, because I mean, every time I talk about this, I hear other good suggestions. So I don't know if you've tried things that have been really successful, or if others have tried things that have been really successful.
I would say, like, we've done some stuff virtually. One thing that I've been noticing just from the Spark point of view is, like, some teams will come in here once a week or once a month to get together, and then they'll go their separate ways for the rest of the week, which seems like it's working pretty well for them to keep that culture going.
Yeah, I think when you can, it makes a huge difference to be able to do that. Absolutely.
One thing that I really like that my company does is every couple of months we'll kind of switch it up, but currently right now we're doing Waffle Wednesdays.
Ooh,
and it's
fun.
one Wednesday a month, and we all kind of like pitch in and we do breakfast, and it's such a simple thing. And sometimes the night before I'm like frantic, so I'm like, oh, I gotta get something together. But it's nice because I think people can bond over food, and it creates conversation. And it's like one day I don't really have to like pack anything. I can just go to the office, enjoy some good breakfast, or usually there's some donuts there. And I feel like it's such a subtle, small thing, but I find myself looking forward to it when I see it like kind of coming up on my calendar. So I just thought that was kind of a unique idea.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It doesn't have to be expensive, and it can be people pitching in. It just a chance to be together is great. Yeah. Good. Any other questions?
Great. Does anybody have any more questions? No. Okay. Well, do you have anything else, Annie, you wanted to go over?
No, I'm happy to, if anyone has follow-up questions. I did put my email in the chat. And Judy, if you want to send me an email so that I have your contact information, I'll send you some suggested questions to start with for a survey.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. And like I mentioned, we're going to be putting this on Facebook and social media. We'll tag you guys. And if anybody who's watching this on Facebook has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll make sure that they get to Anne so that she can answer them and get a dialogue going online.